Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something totally different. It's this personalized healing ritual, and it blends ancient Egyptian magic with modern therapy techniques. It's kind of like, I don't know, giving someone a map to their own subconscious or something. And instead of like street names, you've got ancient symbols and brainwave frequencies guiding the way. Expert speaker, what's got you so fascinated by this particular ritual?
It's just so out there, I mean, this isn't some meditation app. We're talking about guiding someone named Grace through a full-blown mystical experience, and it's all designed just for her. We're talking Egyptian deities, hypnotic language, even using sound frequencies to actually shift brainwave states. It's like they took a blueprint for transformation that's been lost for centuries, dusted it off, and said, let's reinterpret this for the modern world.
Okay, I'm with you. So how does this whole thing actually work? Where does Grace's journey begin?
Okay, picture this. Grace starts by entering a state of deep relaxation, like a cozy, safe space, maybe some calming music playing in the background. And this sets the stage for her journey into the nun. It's this concept from Egyptian mythology that represents the primordial waters of chaos.
Hold on, the primordial waters of chaos. That sounds a little intense for a healing ritual. Why start in a place associated with chaos?
Because sometimes you gotta embrace a little chaos to find order. In Egyptian mythology, the nun is where everything came from, a state of pure potential. It's like hitting the reset button on your entire system,
So in this context, the nun isn't about danger. It's about wiping the slate clean, creating a space for something new to emerge.
Exactly. It's about dissolving the old patterns, old beliefs, even the physical stuff Grace wants to heal, like clearing out the weeds to make way for a thriving garden.
That makes a lot of sense. But if the nun is the starting point, where does Grace go next?
From the nun, the ritual guides her into the duat, which is the ancient Egyptian underworld. But before you go picturing fire and brimstone, remember that in this context, the duat isn't about punishment.
It's more about transformation, like a cosmic composting bin where old energies get broken down and reborn as something new.
You got it. It's where Grace goes through shedding the old, embracing the new. And this is where things get really, really interesting. Remember those Egyptian deities we mentioned?
How could I forget you had me at Egyptian deities?
Well, this is where they come into play, and it goes beyond just invoking their names. We're talking full-on embodiment. Grace actually embodies Apep, the serpent of chaos, and the person guiding her. They take on the role of Atum, the creator god.
Wait, she becomes Apep. Wow. What's the reason behind choosing Apep for Grace to embody?
Remember how we talked about the nun being about dissolution? Apep, the serpent of chaos, that's that energy perfectly embodied. This part of the ritual isn't about shying away from negativity, it's about facing it head on.
So instead of avoiding her pain or challenges, Grace, as Apep, is given the power to actually dismantle those negative energies.
Exactly. Sometimes you have to break things down to build them back up stronger,
I'm beginning to see why you call this ritual creative. It's not just visualizing healing, it's like actively participating in it, almost like shadow work, but on a mythical level. But if Grace is Apep, who or what is she dismantling?
That's where it gets really interesting. This is where the personalization of this whole ritual really comes through. Remember, this entire experience is tailored to Grace's unique needs, her unique challenges.
Right, so there's something specific from her life that she needs to confront. A fear she has to overcome. A limiting belief she needs to let go of.
Exactly. It could be any of those things. It's about identifying those deep-seated blocks, the internal roadblocks that are preventing her from truly living her best life.
Okay, so let's say there's a particular fear Grace wants to overcome. How does that play out in the ritual?
Okay, imagine this. With the guide embodying Atum, Grace, as Apep, is encouraged to bring that fear to life. Like, give it a form, give it substance within the landscape of the nun.
So it's not just this vague feeling, it becomes tangible, something she can actually interact with.
Exactly, and that's where Apep's power comes in. She can coil around it, constrict it, and ultimately dismantle that fear. But here's the thing. It's not about getting rid of the fear entirely.
Because fear on its own isn't necessarily bad. It's how we react to it that makes all the difference.
Right. You got it. This ritual isn't about pretending fear doesn't exist. It's about transforming how we relate to it. It's about taking back our power from those fears that have been holding us back.
Okay, I'm with you so far. Grace, as Apep, confronts and dismantles the fear. But where does Atum, the creator god, fit into this whole thing? Is he just an observer to all of this?
Not at all. Atum's super important in all of this. His role is deeply intertwined with Apep's destructive power. You see, while Apep dismantles the old, Atum steps in as this force of creation. He takes the energy that Apep has released and uses it to rebuild and revitalize.
So it's a simultaneous thing then. Destruction and creation, chaos and order, all happening within the nun.
You're getting it, like that old saying, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Sometimes you need that deconstruction, that breaking down of old structures to create something new and better.
This is blowing my mind. So Apep dismantles, Atum steps in with the cosmic construction crew, rebuilding, revitalizing. But what about Set? Remember Set, often seen as the bad boy of Egyptian mythology, the god of chaos.
Ah, yes, Set. Always there, lurking in the background, adding a bit of an edge to things.
I have a feeling his role in this ritual isn't exactly straightforward.
You would be right about that. You see, Set's not there to mess things up. He's more like a guardian, making sure the whole process runs smoothly.
So he's like the cosmic safety inspector, making sure the demolition doesn't take out the wrong wall.
I like that analogy. Set brings that element of controlled chaos, making sure Apep's destruction doesn't go overboard and that what Atum creates is actually good for Grace.
Just like in nature, right? You've got those destructive forces like storms, but they clear the way for new growth, a return to balance.
Exactly. This ritual really captures that natural cycle of death and rebirth. It reminds us we have to embrace the chaos to experience true transformation.
This is also fascinating. We talked about the nun, the roles of Apep, Atum, even Set, but what about the duat? What's its role in Grace's healing journey?
That's where we're headed next. The trip to the duat is where things get even more interesting and where the true power of this ritual really starts to show itself. It's easy to think about the duat, the Egyptian underworld, like it's this scary, dark place.
Yeah, like that basement you're too scared to go into.
Right. But in this ritual, the duat isn't about punishment. It's actually like the opposite. It's about power, potential, a place of transformation and rebirth.
So more like a cosmic spa then.
Exactly. And here, Grace, who's still embodying Apep, and with Atum and Set, they go on a very special mission. Remember those two sigils we talked about? Those symbols for destruction and a rebirth that we introduced at the start?
Oh, right. Those sigils, they're like energetic bookmarks. They're marking Grace's intention for transformation. So what happens to them?
This is where it gets really interesting. Grace travels to the duat to release those sigils. She's embedding those intentions for destruction and rebirth into this mystical place.
It's like planting those intentions in the best soil imaginable. But why the duat? What's so special about it? Why not release them in the nun?
Well, remember, the nun is that primordial chaos, that starting point. But the duat, that's where transformation actually happens. It's where, in Egyptian belief, the dead went to be reborn. When she releases the sigils in the duat, Grace is kind of anchoring those intentions for destruction and rebirth into her very being on a much deeper level.
Ah, so it's not just releasing them, it's about doing it in a place where that transformation is already happening. It's like those intentions get amplified.
Yes, it's like taking those seeds of intention and putting them in a cosmic greenhouse where they can grow.
Wow. It's like the creators of this ritual thought of everything, the energy of each realm, every step, it's all so deliberate.
And this is where the modern science comes in. Remember when we talked about brainwave entrainment?
Yeah, using sound frequencies to influence brainwave activity, guiding the brain into specific states, right?
Right. Well, during the trip to the duat, they use a specific type of brainwave frequency to actually enhance the effect of releasing those sigils.
Okay, so we talked about alpha waves for relaxing and delta waves for healing, but what kind of brainwave activity are we talking about here? What helps with a journey to the duat?
Gamma waves. These are the high-frequency ones. Heightened awareness, bursts of insight, those aha moments.
So like the brainwave equivalent of a superhighway for information and higher consciousness. Makes sense, given what's happening in this part of the ritual.
Exactly. When she releases the sigils in that gamma wave state, Grace is amplifying those intentions, infusing them with the energy of the duat.
So it's not just symbolic, it's using these specific brainwave states to make the ritual even more powerful. This is incredible. Every little detail has a purpose.
It's true. Just like an instrument, every piece has to be there for it to work correctly. And speaking of, the journey doesn't end with releasing the sigils in the duat. That's actually just the start of the next stage of transformation.
Oh, wow. So after the duat, where does Grace go next? Does she come back to the real world?
Not quite yet. There's one more stop on this journey, back to the nun.
Wait, she goes back to that primordial water of chaos? I thought she already did that at the beginning.
She did, but this time it's different. This time it's not about dissolution. It's about integrating and cleansing before she comes back to her body, like a cosmic rinse cycle,
Okay, I like that. After all of that, it makes sense to have a way to just wash away any leftover stuff from the transformation. What happens during this second visit?
This time when Grace goes back to the nun, it's not about dismantling or destroying anything, it's about integration. She's taking everything she experienced, the fear, the work with Apep and Atum, those intentions she released, and she brings it all with her.
It's like she went into the deepest parts of herself, shook things up, and now everything is settling into a new order.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that real transformation isn't just about those big insights, it's about those quieter moments of integration where the changes really sink in.
It makes you think about how important it is to ground yourself after doing any kind of inner work, whether it's meditating or even a therapy session.
Absolutely. Like climbing a mountain, getting to the top is amazing, but that slow journey back down is just as important. And just like the other parts of this ritual, they use brainwave entrainment during this phase too.
So from Gamma and the Duat, what kind of brainwave frequencies do they use during this last integration in the nun?
This time, they shift back to delta waves.
Delta waves, those slow, deep brain waves, the ones that are all about deep healing and restoration. It's like tucking Grace in for a nap after her big adventure.
Exactly. It's about letting all of those experiences really sink in before she goes back to her physical body and regular life.
So we followed Grace on this incredible journey from the nun to the Duat and back again. She's confronted her fears, embraced the chaos, even planted those intentions for transformation. But now comes the real world. How does she take all of those experiences and insights back into her everyday life?
That's the real question, isn't it? It's easy to have a profound experience in a ritual, but how do we actually make it mean something in our regular lives? That's where this last stage is so interesting.
So what does this final stage actually look like? Is it like snapping your fingers and she's back to reality? Or is there a more gradual shift back to the physical world?
Imagine waking up from a really deep sleep, totally refreshed. That's the kind of energy this part evokes. Gently guiding Grace back to her body, her senses, everything around her.
No sudden movements, just easing back into things.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about grounding. You know, she's been on this expansive journey, now it's about reconnecting to the physical.
I bet after all of that, it would be tempting to just stay in those cosmic realms. Who wants to come back down to Earth after all that?
Right, that's why this part is so important. It's about integrating these transformative experiences, not just escaping into them.
So how does the ritual help her do that? How does it make sure she doesn't just leave those insights behind in the Duat?
This is where that brainwave entrainment comes in again for one last shift. As Grace starts to reconnect with her body, they move into alpha brainwaves.
Alpha waves, right? Those are the relaxed, focused ones. The ones you see with meditation, that calm but alert state. It's kind of the perfect bridge between those mystical experiences and being able to function in everyday life.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance where you can tap into the wisdom from those deep states of consciousness, but still be present in the here and now.
So alpha waves help ground those experiences. But then what? Does the ritual just end?
No, and that's what I think is so cool about this ritual. It doesn't just leave Grace high and dry, you know. It really emphasizes how to take these insights and actually use them in life.
It's not a one and done thing. It's about giving her the power to keep healing long after the ritual's over.
Yeah, the guide might say something like, carry this sense of peace with you throughout your day, or remember the strength you felt as Apep when you faced challenges.
It's like planting those seeds of intention all over again. But this time, they're being planted in Grace herself.
Yes, exactly. It's all about reminding Grace that she has the power to choose how she shows up. She can access that strength and wisdom whenever she needs to.
This whole ritual is amazing. Every little detail is so intentional. From the deities to the brainwave entrainment, it's like a perfectly choreographed dance between ancient wisdom and modern science.
It makes you realize what we're capable of when we bring those two things together, and when we think about healing in such a creative and intentional way.
It really does. Well, expert speaker, this has been an amazing deep dive. I feel like we've explored a completely new way of thinking about healing and transformation.
Me too. It really highlights that we all have that capacity for healing within us.
I completely agree. And for our listeners, what ancient wisdom do you draw on in your own lives? What helps you face your own challenges and move forward? Keep those questions in mind, and until next time, happy exploring.